Anthony Wainwright, a 54-year-old inmate on Florida's death row, was executed by lethal injection. The execution took place on a Tuesday evening at Florida State Prison, located near Starke. Wainwright had been convicted for crimes committed nearly 3 decades prior, in 1994. His case represents a significant chapter in Florida's capital punishment history. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The victim in this case was identified as Carmen Gayheart. She was just 23 years old at the time of her death. Carmen was a mother, leaving behind 2 young children. She was also a dedicated community college student, actively pursuing her education. Beyond her studies and family life, Carmen Gayheart had a deep love for animals. She was also training to become a nurse, aspiring to a career dedicated to caring for others. Her life was tragically cut short, interrupting her plans and leaving a void in her family and community. The horrific crime occurred in Lake City, Florida. Anthony Wainwright and his accomplice Richard Hamilton had recently escaped from a North Carolina prison in April 1994. Following their escape, they stole a green Cadillac and burglarized a home, taking firearms and money. They then drove south, making their way into Florida. Their journey was interrupted when their stolen vehicle broke down in Lake City. It was there on April 27, 1994, that they targeted Carmen Gayheart in a supermarket parking lot. Carmen was loading groceries into her blue Ford Bronco when Wainwright and Hamilton approached her. They forced her into her own vehicle at gunpoint. The 2 men then drove off with her, taking her against her will. While inside the vehicle, they subjected her to a brutal sexual assault, raping her in the back seat. After this horrific act, they took her out of the vehicle. They then attempted to strangle her, a violent act that preceded the final fatal assault. Ultimately, they shot her twice in the back of the head. Following the shooting, they dragged her body several dozen yards away from the road, attempting to conceal their crime. The brutality of the act shocked the community and initiated a widespread manhunt. Wainwright and Hamilton were apprehended relatively quickly. They were arrested in Mississippi the day after the murder. Their capture involved a shootout with law enforcement officers. Anthony Wainwright was brought to trial and convicted in 1995. He was found guilty of multiple felony charges related to the incident. These convictions included first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and rape. During the penalty phase of the trial, the jury considered the evidence and the nature of the crimes. The jury unanimously recommended that Anthony Wainwright be sentenced to death. This recommendation was subsequently accepted by the court. Following his conviction and death sentence, Anthony Wainwright's legal team initiated a lengthy process of appeals. Over the years, they filed multiple appeals in state and federal courts, though these efforts ultimately proved unsuccessful in overturning his conviction or sentence. The appeals cited various issues with the original trial. Arguments were raised regarding potential evidence of brain damage and claims of intellectual disability, suggesting these factors should have impacted his culpability or sentencing. Lawyers contended that the case was marred by systemic failures within the justice system. These alleged failures included arguments about flawed DNA evidence presented at trial. They also raised concerns about erroneous jury instructions given to the panel that decided his fate. Furthermore, claims of ineffective assistance of counsel during the trial phase were a recurring theme in the appeals. A significant point of contention involved a jailhouse informant. It was reported that this informant later admitted to testifying against Wainwright in exchange for a lighter sentence in his own case. The defense argued that this arrangement was not properly disclosed to them at the time of the trial, potentially impacting the informant's credibility and the fairness of the proceedings. As the execution date approached, Wainwright's legal team pursued final avenues of appeal. The U.S. Supreme Court denied several of these last-ditch appeals, indicating their unwillingness to intervene. A final, last-minute effort to halt the execution focused on Wainwright's right to choose his legal representation. This specific appeal was also ultimately denied by the courts, clearing the way for the execution to proceed. The execution process for Anthony Wainwright began shortly after 6 p.m. on the scheduled day. It commenced around 6:10 p.m. As the lethal injection drugs were administered, witnesses observed physical signs from Wainwright. He showed signs of shuddering and blinking. He also took several deep breaths before his body became still. These physical reactions are sometimes observed during lethal injection executions. Wainwright became completely still at approximately 6:14 p.m. Medical personnel monitored his condition. He was officially pronounced dead at 6:22 p.m., marking the conclusion of the execution. He was given the opportunity to make a final statement. However, according to witnesses present, his final words were inaudible. The content of his last statement, if any was attempted, could not be discerned. Anthony Wainwright's execution was the sixth carried out in Florida during the current year. This number represents a notable increase in the state's use of capital punishment compared to recent history. In 2022, Florida conducted only one execution. However, in 2023, the state executed 6 individuals, matching the number reached with Wainwright's execution. This suggests a potential shift or acceleration in the pace of executions in Florida. Another execution is reportedly scheduled in Florida later in the same month, indicating this trend may continue. Richard Hamilton, Wainwright's accomplice in the 1994 crimes, was also sentenced to death. However, Hamilton did not live to face execution. He died on death row in January 2023 at the age of 59, approximately a year and a half before Wainwright's execution. For the victim's family, the execution brought a complex mix of emotions. Carmen Gayheart's sister David spoke about the agonizingly long wait for justice. She noted that it had been 3 decades since her sister was taken from them. David expressed feeling cheated that Richard Hamilton died of natural causes before he could be executed for his role in the crime. The prospect of Wainwright's execution brought intense feelings. David was reportedly overcome with emotion when the death warrant for Anthony Wainwright was signed. The passage of time meant that Carmen Gayheart's parents did not live to see the execution of either man responsible for their daughter's death. They passed away while still waiting for justice to be fully served. David Gayheart kept a meticulous record of the lengthy legal proceedings. She documented the decades of appeals and court filings in a book, preserving the history of the case. In reflecting on her sister, David emphasized the importance of remembering Carmen's life. She stated powerfully, "She was here, she mattered, she should be remembered, and she was loved." Her words served as a poignant reminder of the life lost and the enduring impact of the crime on the victim's family. The execution closed a long and painful chapter for those affected by the events of April 1994.